heard it before. The connected age. Life at the speed of the internet. It's a digital world. What you might not have heard is that we can keep it safe, because at CrowdStrike, we stop breaches. So wherever you go, go with confidence. Anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere. CrowdStrike. We stop breaches.
Every day, bad guys are coming up with new ways to break in, and all defenses are not created equal. You can't focus on your business if you're constantly working to maintain a growing list of security tools that use conventional defenses against unconventional attacks. With CrowdStrike, there's a better way. It starts with an easy-to-deploy, intelligent, lightweight agent that protects any workload, physical, virtual, or mobile, on any cloud, public, private, or hybrid, which connects to the cloud-native Falcon platform. It's born in the cloud, leverages the CrowdStrike threat graph, and via the power of cloud-scale AI and machine learning, it correlates trillions and trillions of events in real time, constantly learning and evolving. So when new threats emerge, Falcon won't be fooled. The Falcon platform has a wide range of modules to meet the unique challenges of modern IT and security teams. It starts with endpoint security modules, cloud security modules, security and IT operations modules, managed services modules, threat intelligence modules, plus the CrowdStrike Store, a diverse and growing marketplace of applications that leverage the CrowdStrike architecture and the single agent, so you can solve new challenges with the same investment. So whatever challenges you face in this new security era, we can help, because at CrowdStrike, we're built to stop breaches, so you can focus on what matters to your business. CrowdStrike, we stop breaches.
It is a sunny spring California day in Sonoma Raceway for the first round of the Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS. For the first round of the season, we're here with CrowdStrike Racing and CrowdStrike Racing's driver, Kevin Boehm, a senior engineer at Honda R&D, also a race winner from this weekend in TC America. We've got Kevin alongside Lynn Friedman from Operation Motorsport, as well as Jason Leach from Operation Motorsport, and Julian Shook from Customer Team Management at Mercedes-AMG Motorsport. So I'm really excited to be here today for the second and final race of the weekend here from Sonoma for the season opening round. 90 minutes of racing coming up in just a few moments. But Kevin, first of all, welcome and congratulations on your win this morning. I didn't get to see it as I'm remote in Austin, but a first win of the year for you and setting things in the right direction.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, it was an exciting race this morning. There's a lot of action to start, and then was able to kind of stretch out a lead and made it look easy, even though it never is, as we know.
It is never easy, and this racetrack you've had some success at in the past, so kind of kicking things off where you left off from last season. We've got a 90-minute race here today for the Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS. Of course, here for CrowdStrike Racing. Of course, as we know, CrowdStrike and AWS work together in a 360-degree relationship. And for CrowdStrike, it's the official internet and cloud security provider of SRO Americas. It's a home race for CrowdStrike this weekend in Sonoma. course, CrowdStrike based in the San Francisco Bay Area. And of course, effective cybersecurity means you see and stop threats like hackers as fast as possible. For Kevin Bohm, seeing and stopping threats means finishing in first. So you've done that successfully so far this weekend. As we get onto our pace laps here, Kevin, we've got a 90-minute race coming up today. We saw a lot of battles yesterday within CrowdStrike Racing, but that was a lot of fun to watch. I think we're going to see some other great battles this afternoon as well.
That's right, and believe it or not, the weather's changed quite a bit from yesterday with the sun load kind of being really strong, so that I think the track temps are going to be a little bit different, so it's going to be interesting to see which teams kind of cope with that the best here at the start of the race.
Absolutely. So drivers and teams getting warmed up here again today. We're going to talk to the Operation Motorsports folks as well as Julian Shook here after the green flag flies. But just to get things kicked off, we're going to talk with Kevin Bohm a little bit before we get going racing. Of course, if you'd like to follow along, CrowdStrikeRacing.com/Sonoma will take you where you want to go to learn more about CrowdStrike Racing for this season's efforts. And also next Thursday, or this coming Thursday, I should say, March 11th, the CrowdStrike Racing Virtual Racing League returns for their final, or their penultimate round of action in Assetto Corsa Competizione this Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific on the CrowdStrike Racing YouTube channel. So make sure you don't miss that. Also joined by AWS. AWS, the title presenter for the Global SRO Series, Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. And for 13 years, they've been the most comprehensive and broadly adopted cloud platform and entering a new collaboration that saw them become the official cloud and machine learning provider for SRO America, as well as a series partner of Pirelli GT4 America and TC America. So lots of I'll pat your back, you pat mine going on here in SRO, Kevin, and it works out great. And of course, CrowdStrike's new motto is "We win as one," and there's just so much teamwork going on, not only in the paddock but behind the scenes of SRO as well.
Yeah, that's right, and I'm glad we have Operation Motorsport with us here today because they're a key part of the teamwork that was required this week to be able to come off with 2 podiums. So yeah, it's impossible to do it by yourself, especially at this level, and the only way is to do it as a team, and kind of when that team works as one, that's the way you can really stretch out those results.
For sure. We've got GT3 machines lining up here in a little bit, and we'll talk to Julian a little later in the day about GT3 and GT4 and how Mercedes plays a role in that. All the cars we'll be watching this afternoon that we're interested in from the DXDT Racing Camp are the Mercedes AMG GT3s, and they're the Evo generations, the newer bodywork and aerodynamics on these cars. They look and sound fantastic, and they're up front. I believe I haven't seen a look at the starting lineup just yet, but we've got the 63, the 19, and the 04 all in this race. The 19 has some purple on the side. The 63 is silver, and the 04, I believe, is the gray side panels. So there's your starting lineup rolling along the bottom of your screen. And Kevin, 90 minutes. The racetrack, you mentioned the different weather. A little hotter today, potentially?
Yeah, the air temperature doesn't seem to be that much different, but the sun load is quite a bit. So I think the track temp itself is going to be hotter, and this track is really sensitive for that, for how it affects the rubber that's already built into the track. And definitely I felt that in my morning race, even though the air temp was quite a bit colder. So I imagine that with these really wide sticky tires on the GT cars, they're going to feel the same thing.
Absolutely. And of course, this racetrack just over 2 miles here, 12 corners. And we're running the FIA-approved layout. You'll see here at the top of the S's, instead of remaining to the right and running the remainder of those S's, we're going to head down the hill towards turn number 9 and enter this chicane complex, Kevin, which is a great passing opportunity. You can jump some curbs, too, and try to sling your way around. Yeah,
that's right. I actually like this configuration a lot more than the kind of high-speed S's that we're accustomed to seeing in some other series, and it really is because it opens up another passing opportunity and forces all the cars to kind of close up and be really close.
So field racked up and stacked up for the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. Round 1 from Sonoma, race number 2, the final race of the weekend for the GT3 only category here as we roll around turn number 11 and head up towards the front straightaway. We're going racing from Sonoma. Got Kevin Bohm, Operation Motorsport, and Julian Shook from Mercedes AMG joining us. We'll talk to them here shortly, but for the green flag, we're racing trouble already. The Lamborghini gets knocked sideways, 4 wide, and already dramas at the start. Can we get through turn number 1? Somehow we do. Now climbing up the hill towards the first corner. Out up front, it's Colin Brown in the 04 car, clear to the lead after a wild move. There's the 19 and 63 shuffled in the mid-pack as they climb up the hill, Kevin. Wow, that was dramatic.
Yeah, I couldn't quite see exactly what happened there, but it's definitely not a clean start. But good thing the 04 car got through clean. It looks like he's stretching out just a little bit of a lead already.
And down the inside, there's the Lamborghini going the short way around in turn number 4. That was the pole-sitting car, and both of those machines have gone backwards in the opening laps here. Now they're going to run up the hill towards turn 5, but Brown out is free and clear here early. So, Kevin, while we saw that dramatic start, we did talk to you a little bit about your victories in TC America. Of course, you're the Rookie of the Year in the TCA category from last year. Won the championship on top of that. So congratulations, moving up to the TC car. What's that adjustment been like for you?
Well, I mean, when we got here this weekend, the car was pretty close to being competitive, but not enough to really compete for podiums. And every session we were on track, we really tried to find some adjustment to make the car do just a little bit more of what I wanted. And in the end, I think being able to pull off a win really shows that a lot of those adjustments just combined to give us the performance we needed to win.
Over the crest through turn number 9, and now the run down to turn 11. And a little bit of shuffling throughout. There's the 63 car making a move here up the inside. And one lap complete. So that adjustment to TC going well so far with 2 podiums on the weekend. But still lots of the season remaining, and our next round is actually where I am today at Circuit of the Americas. You were here at Circuit of the Americas a couple months ago. Your thoughts on that racetrack, and are you excited to come back here?
Yeah, I mean, we raced at COTA twice last year, and we were able to make big improvements on last year's Civic Si as well. And I think basically trying to learn what really made the difference in between those 2 visits last year, and trying to carry that knowledge of what I learned this year on the new car. I'm hoping we'll arrive there with a decent car to start with, and of course we'll always keep iterating and trying to find differences to make it even better once we arrive.
Awesome. And part of that success, even last year, was Operation Motorsport. We have Lynn Friedman here as well as Jason Leach from Operation Motorsport. Jason, let's start with you as we see this battle for position here. The 63 on the inside going for a position. Big shuffle there, and through goes Ryan DL in that car. So, Jason, welcome to Sonoma. Of course, you were at the Indianapolis 8 Hour. We talked with you there, but let everyone know at home what Operation Motorsport is and how it helps guys like Kevin Boehm and others in the paddock and around the world.
Absolutely, Kyle. So thanks for having me back. Thanks for CrowdStrike Racing for putting on this broadcast and inviting us to be up here today. So Operation Motorsport, for those that are not aware, is a 501c3 program. Veteran advocacy based out of Brighton, Ontario, and Raleigh, North Carolina. What we do essentially is we help military veterans suffering from medical, physical, or mental health challenges due to their service. We help them in rebuilding their sense of purpose, team, and identity, primarily by embedding them as volunteer crew members into race car teams such as Kevin's team here. So started that relationship with Kevin last year at COTA. Almost a year ago to the date, and saw tremendous success, a great opportunity to continue to bond and provide those services there with Kevin, but also for Kevin to provide an opportunity to where our beneficiaries could learn some new skills, find an opportunity to give back into the motorsports world or give back and be part of that team. And then, as we saw, Kevin's tremendous success there in TC and now seeing it again here today with 2 beneficiaries joining Kevin here at Sonoma, ideally for the rest of the season here as well.
That's awesome. And Lynn, welcome to Sonoma and CrowdStrike Racing's coverage of Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS. You're active in the motorsports world. You've been around for many years, but you've joined Operation Motorsport in 2017 as a board member and volunteered as an event coordinator. What's your experience with Operation Motorsport like? Tell us what your role is and what you do.
Well, thank you, Kyle. First of all, I do serve as a volunteer as an event coordinator at these races, and that is sort of covers many things. I work as a liaison with the team principals and the beneficiaries that are here, and I kind of have their backs here at the races. So it's involved from logistics and in their transportation getting here, their activities here, their lodging, and just they need stuff. So I'm on hand for that. And then I also serve as well as on the board of directors.
So I guess a question I have is how has working with Kevin Boehm's championship-winning season helped those beneficiaries? It's one of those relationships that sort of goes both ways. So what's it been like for the beneficiaries to work on that championship
Well,
winning?
Ryan, while I cannot confirm.
Kyle, if I had the exact words, I don't have enough time to tell you how great it's been. Our guys are nothing but just so excited. They've learned so much. It's really a dynamic group with Boehm Racing. Kevin and Herbert, his dad, the team principal, do so much. Our beneficiaries have been more involved, hands-on this year more than ever. So it's just tremendous. These guys are overwhelmed.
That's great to hear. And of course, Operation Motorsport helping so much behind the scenes. I have in my notes here that Will Babineau is with DXDT for the second season now, is working on one of the team's Mercedes with Aaron Vogel. How has his experience with Operation Motorsport been? I guess this goes out to anybody who would like to answer.
Well, I'll start with that because Will worked with Boehm Racing last year, so it's really exciting for him to be with DXDT this time. And I think one of the great successes that we had with Will this weekend was he learned to be the fueler and go over the pit and do fueling, which is really a big thing. I'll let Jason kind of chime in on that.
Yeah, and when you look at crew members and kind of how they progress within a race car team, that first time going over the wall, in a live race, it's almost a rite of passage. The Navy guys would get akin that to crossing the equator for the first time in their sailor career. So we're thankful for DXDT and David Askew and team manager Aaron there, just for opening their doors a bit more to Operation Motorsport, allowing us to come on board with them with the Mercedes, a bit higher class car. And then also we'll have Katrina Williams joining them in CODA to become a part of that team full-time this year as well.
That's really exciting. And obviously, I've heard in the past that you guys also have an esports initiative with iRacing. Jason, could you elaborate on what that is and how that involves the community?
Absolutely. So, much like most of the motorsports world, when COVID-19 hit last year, we had to find a way to virtually engage with our customer, which are our beneficiaries. Not only were they stuck at home, but they didn't have any motorsport real world live events to come to. So we began an iRacing program. We saw steady growth over 2020 to the point that we decided to include it here in 2021. We have great sponsorship and organizations within the motorsports world and automotive world. We've had some guests here. Kevin and Bob Page have been on board from CrowdStrike Racing to help talk about the partnership that we have with them. But it's just a way for us to get together on a Tuesday night and just general racing in order to detach or just focus on, get away from those things that are challenging our community, with everything else going on in the world. With that said, though, too, we have racers from the professional side joining us as well. So it's also an opportunity to virtually engage with professional race car drivers in the motorsports world with other folks who otherwise may not have that opportunity to virtually share a track with them.
Well, that's really great, and we're going to get more into that a little bit later in this race, but I would like to introduce another guest that we have here today, and of course that's Julian Shook from Customer and Team Management at Mercedes-AMG Motorsport. Julian, welcome. I am a big fan of the thunderous Mercedes-AMG GT3 car, so thanks for joining us today. I would like to know what your role entails and how this weekend has been for you so far, watching these Mercedes slice and dice throughout this field.
Right. So first of all, thank you very much for having me as well. My role at Mercedes-AMG Customer Racing is the team and customer management for both the GT3 and the GT4, with special dedication here to the North American market. So my role entails actually everything which has to do with the sales of the cars, the production back home in Germany of these machines, and then, everything that is in relation with supporting our customer racing teams.
So this year we've got a brand new series. Of course, we've got the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, which is what we are running right now. We also had GT America a little earlier in the weekend. What's the difference between GT America and GT World Challenge, and what does that look like for the cars?
Absolutely. So what you can see right now going on is the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS, which is a 2-driver series. So you have a driver pairing, like for example, Pro-Am pairing, so professional driver and amateur driver. And the new series, the GT America, powered by AWS, is just a single driver series, which is especially dedicated for bronze-rated drivers. From my opinion, this is a great addition, as you can also see in the entry number, because it just gives the bronze drivers even more track time to familiarize themselves, feel more comfortable in the car, get out more performance of the car, and then just transfer that to the race that you can now see.
And I'm, of course, as a person that has not been behind the wheel of one of these machines, I would love an opportunity. But racers do have an option to run either or. What would be a reason that you would run GT America over GT World Challenge or vice versa? I know some drivers like George Kurtz here at CrowdStrike Racing are doing both this weekend. George found some success. But if you had to choose, why would you go one way or the other?
It's actually hard to tell because the multi-class racing of GT America is amazing. So you do not only have the GT3 machinery like you do in the GT World Challenge, but you also have classes like, for example, the GT4 cars. So this is just a different kind of racing if you have multi-class racing rather compared to just single-class racing. So personally, I would always choose the multi-class racing. I think that's more exciting. You have more tricky situations as a driver. You also have to get used to slower classes, how to overtake them, how to approach them. Very exciting.
And of course, in both of those series, we have the Mercedes-AMG GT3s. There's also, I'm not sure if there are any out there, but I know that there are Mercedes-AMG GT4s available for customers as well. How can the Mercedes-AMG GT3s compare to a Mercedes-AMG GTR or any other car that you could go down to your local Mercedes dealer and get?
So basically, the GT4 car is more related to the street car. So there's less adaptations coming from the street car towards the race car. So when you look at the GT3 car, definitely have lots of different bodywork elements from carbon fiber. You have a different aerodynamic. So the cars are really light. The GT4 car has less adaptations, so it's closer to a street car with just minimum adaptations to race them professionally. So less aerodynamic, for example, and compared to the GT3 car, more weight.
So some differences between the road-going cars and the race cars for sure. Of course, these cars, I believe, as you mentioned, built in Germany, but these cars are raced all over the world. Of course, Mercedes-AMG has been involved in SRO also in Europe and Australia, which is a new market for SRO in general. So what's that been like, kind of facilitating these movement of the race cars all over the world and dominating on a global platform?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge actually, but it's also amazing. I mean, you get to know customers from all over the world. You can see your products racing in all different series of SRO. So we're really happy to also have the GT World Challenge Australia from this season onwards, where we will actually also have one GT3 car and one GT4 car running. So really looking forward to that.
That's really exciting. Just as a side note here, we got the Race Vision powered by AWS on the right-hand side of the screen. The corner speeds through the carousel, turn number 6. I love this data integration from AWS. We had Adam Chugg from AWS on yesterday explaining how this stuff works, and it is witchcraft, and it's awesome. It's so cool as a data geek and a racing nerd to look at all this and see how close these cars are. But of course, Julian, we see the DL machine, the 63, 78.2 miles an hour, right up there with the Acura NSX GT3. So close here, and of course there is BOP in these series that sort of keep all the cars relatively equal, but each car has their strengths, and the Mercedes at Sonoma seems to really feel at home.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at a track like Sonoma, technical track, lots of blind corners as well. You really got to have the confidence in the car. And this is really one of the strengths of our Mercedes-AMG GT3, the overall drivability of the car. So and maybe for those of the audience who do not know about the BOP, so this is simply to align all different car concepts. I mean, you have two-seaters, you also have mid-engine cars, you have front-engine cars. So the BOP is simply for balancing these cars on a lap, so they could be equally quick, at least theoretically. And then they can race against each other, which, is the only way how we can have this big number of different manufacturers competing against each other, which is just beautiful to see.
course, these cars race all over the world, and Sonoma is one of the tighter, more technical tracks, but this car also sounds really good. It sort of has this personality that racing fans sort of associate with the Mercedes-AMG platform. That's got to be a source of pride at AMG, I'm sure, to have a car that fans trackside like to point out and say, that's the coolest sounding one here. What's that like to be a part of AMG, which makes the best sounding car on the racetrack?
Yeah, it's absolutely. So probably know that at AMG we have the one man, one engine philosophy. So that really one engine mechanic builds the engine from scratch. So from the first screw until the final filling of the engine with oil. So yeah, it's just amazing to have this engine here, to hear the roar. Yeah, it's just a unique sounding car, still is. So really looking forward to have it.
Really, really cool. There's one of the mid-engine cars you were mentioning, the Lamborghini Huracan GT3, working its way down into the infield section. So, Julian, thanks for chatting. We're going to chat with you a little bit later in the race here as well. Let's move back to Kevin here for a little bit. As we've gotten the race kind of into the first 15 or 20 minutes, Colin Brown is setting a really strong pace out front. Got P1TS running in the background for my data and information. He doesn't have the best lap on the racetrack, a 138.3. It's a little bit behind Jan Halen, but he does have a 2.5-second lead, and he's built up a little bit of a comfort zone, a bit of bubble of safety here in the first half hour of this race.
Right, and sometimes it's not all about trying to set the fastest lap of the race, but it's really about the consistency and managing your tires and trying not to overdrive, and that's how you can kind of maintain a lead and get out there and start controlling the race.
Watching this battle here down into the chicane at turn number 9. There's one of those Aston Martin Vantage V8s running in front of the Ferrari 488 mid-engined car. Got a front engine rear-wheel drive. Oh, look at the M6 darting left as they head down into turn number 11. That BMW is being driven by Robbie Foley in the number 96 and Kazarov in the number 91 Pro-Am car in front. Another thing we should mention is that while the majority of the series is as Julian touched on, that Pro-Am driver lineup, there are a couple drivers out here that are in an all-pro lineup, and there is one team out here, Grunwald in the 488, back in 14th spot, that's on an all-Am driver lineup. So there are different categories running out here on the racetrack, and Colin Brown is leading overall and in class.
Yeah, and since the pro drivers started today, you're not necessarily going to see a huge difference in the performance of one driver to the next until the AM drivers switch in, and that's when some of the pro cars are really going to start to stand out just a little bit as they have so much more experienced drivers behind the wheel.
For sure. And again, you mentioned the way in which they've jumped in the race cars. Yesterday, it was the AM-rated driver that jumped in at the beginning of the race, and then they switched to the Pro. And then Sunday is vice versa. So the 04 CrowdStrike Racing AWS Mercedes-AMG GT3 leads this race by just over 2.5 seconds, 20 minutes in. Kevin, let's go back to your racing here just a little bit. I'd like to encourage anybody in the chat watching here on crowdstrikeracing.com/Sonoma to ask any questions for anybody here. Kevin from CrowdStrike Racing, of course, the Operation Motorsport folks, and Julian from AMG. Any questions, feel free to leave them in the YouTube chat, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. But Kevin, going back, I want to touch a little bit more on Operation Motorsport's involvement with your car. What's the adjustment been like from the TCA car to the TC car mechanically, and what's the learning process been like that for the entire team?
Well, the difference between the cars is not huge. Both of them are still based on road-going Civics, and they actually share a lot of the same kind of upgraded suspension components. And really, it comes down to the TC car has just a little bit more adjustment. It has a little bit of aero. It has just a little bit of wider tires and bigger brakes, and it's just a little bit more of everything. And really, mechanically, just the process that we use to kind of maintain the car and the direction that we go to make adjustments, it hasn't changed that much. It's just because there's a few different options that we have with the new car, deciding which direction we're going to go and how we're going to achieve it has been a little bit of a learning process this weekend. But because we had the support from Operation Motorsport, it allowed us to kind of try a lot of different things pretty quickly, and I didn't have to worry about the schedule as much.
And for the Operation Motorsports folks who are sort of facilitating all this aid down in the garage area, what's that been like from your perspective, working on a new car with the same driver? So there's a lot of relationships that retain and some technical knowledge as well. But what's that transition been like for the team?
So, Kyle, it's been a very good transition, very easy transition. Now, when we look at the two guys that came in here this weekend, Cody and Craig, Cody had already had some previous motorsport experience with another series in the sports car racing world, whereas Craig was a brand new newcomer into sports car racing on this side of the pit wall. He had spent some time doing his own track day events down in Florida, and him and his dad is a longtime Sebring goers, but he's never had the opportunity to actually work on a race car team. So, but he came in already, with general automotive knowledge, and the willingness to keep an open mind, and the willingness to kind of understand he didn't know what he didn't know. And under the tutelage and guidance of Kevin and Herbert and the rest of the DXTT team, if they needed it, help show them kind of what right looks like when it comes to this race car and this race team, in order to make sure that they build that confidence with the team driver and the team writ large in order to compete for the podium, which we saw Kevin do very successfully this weekend.
Of course, at CrowdStrike Racing, CrowdStrike's motto is "We win as one" for 2021. And we were talking extensively with Adam and Kevin yesterday about the team aspect of racing, and a lot of people would look at motorsport and say, well, the driver's controlling the car; it's sort of up to them to an extent. And I'm sure you guys have seen that it really is a team sport, and a lot of that team is on the other side of the pit wall as well. So take me through that team interaction, what the debriefs look like, what you learn from each week, and how you apply it to the next.
Well, for me, whenever we're here at an event, especially this weekend, knowing that the car wasn't going to be perfect for the first session, I knew we were going to have to be making a lot of adjustments on the car. So kind of before the weekend really started, we were able to kind of communicate with Craig and Cody and sort of set some expectations for what we were going to do over the weekend. Kind of show them and try to teach some of the processes that I put in place, which is a lot of checklists and a lot of things that are somewhat routine. And by kind of being able to teach those items to the Operation Motorsport members, we were able to kind of allow me to dive a little bit deeper into the data and kind of dive into my own head about what the car was doing good and bad on track. And that's really what allowed me to decide what we were going to do to adjust on the car and try to improve it. And then once we got there, it was really kind of showing and teaching how to make those adjustments on the car, so that when we come back to it, maybe later into the season, they already have an idea of how to do it. And now I just have to explain what we need to do and not how anymore.
And Kyle, let me jump in here, just add on to that. From a military operation perspective, that's what's ingrained in every service member from day one. How to be a part of that team, how to understand how to work together, and know what the person on your left or your right are doing, but also knowing, okay, you might have to jump in and help with that at any given time. But that's where we see so many similarities between military operations and the motorsports world. It's working through those checklists. It's planning for the unknown. It's working towards together to build that team identity and purpose in order to go out and compete on any given weekend.
We have a question from the YouTube chat asking, have there been any outstanding challenges with the Civic Type R in terms of cooling? Mentioning that the road-going version in some situations can get a little bit hot. So is that something you guys have been chasing down and working on here in Sonoma this weekend, or has it been pretty smooth sailing with that car?
No, I mean, so far this weekend, we were just trying to make the car handle the best that it can. And for the engine cooling, basically HBD has built this car, and it's homologated just like these GT3 cars that we're watching on track right now. And all of the Honda Civic Type Rs that are on track when we're racing in touring car are completely identical. And HBD has put a lot of effort and some modifications to the cooling of the car to try to make it easily durable on track. And we didn't have any issues with that this weekend, and I don't expect to for the rest of the season either.
That's good to hear, and I do want to go back to Julian a little bit, because we started talking about checklists and being meticulous about building processes. And Julian, I'm sure that at Mercedes-AMG, there's so much effort and time that goes into constructing these GT3 Mercedes-AMGs. You mentioned interestingly, that the motors are built by one person. Where else in the line of constructing these cars is a similar approach taken, where each person has a defined and distinct role, but has accountability within the team?
Right, so that is a very interesting question, because from our perspective, and if you're looking at our cars, so the GT4 and the GT3, those are completely manufactured or hand-built. So there is no automation process involved in that. So they are really hand-built. So it's not only our engine, but it's rather the full race car.
So the entire race car is hand-built, and really they are works of art. But, we're talking about the team operation here, of course, Operation Motorsport helping with Kevin, the team back at Mercedes that builds these cars. They're hand-built, but, of course, there's a lot of accountability within the team where everyone's got to do their job just right to make a successful race car. And it seems like, judging by who's leading the race, that Mercedes has that sort of figured out.
Oh, yeah, that looks really good. I mean, in the end, it's still customer racing for us. That means we produce the cars, we hand them out to the customers, but then it's completely in the operation of the customer. And what we're trying to do is just to support as much as the customer wants us to support. So we have our support guys here on site, for example, for spare parts. So that means if the team would need any part that they don't have on stock with them, then they can just approach us and we can hand out the parts they need. And also engineering support. So for example, DXTT makes use of one of our performance engineers, who's a highly rewarded engineer coming from other series as well, and they're hugely experienced. And they can support the team as good as they can to just make sure that the customer is happy in the end and quick on track.
Well, that's really neat. And I know that, Kevin, you've got some engineering experience. Tell me a little bit about that and how that has sort of impacted the way that you approach setting up a race car and maybe even driving it from behind the wheel.
Well, yeah, it's a constant kind of battle that I'm having kind of in my inner dialogue, because whenever I'm driving the car on track and the car isn't doing exactly what I want, I kind of have two options to address it. I can kind of change something that I'm doing with my driving to try to compensate, or I can kind of come up with some adjustment that's available on the car to achieve the same thing. So I'm often trying to get the car adjustment-wise to operate within a certain window, and then I use kind of some driving techniques to sort of be able to fine-tune it from there.
And going back to the Operation Motorsports folks, of course, you're interacting a lot with Kevin throughout the weekend to sort of take his feedback and set the car up. But it goes beyond just the paddock operations as well. So what roles do the Operation Motorsport beneficiaries have beyond the car rolling into and out of the garage?
So what we've seen over time, Kyle, is anybody that comes on board our programs, we try to assess where their interests lie. And for some, it's turning the nuts and bolts on a race car and getting it prepped for the weekend. But in other cases, we have people come to us who are interested in photography and video. So we might link them up with kind of a mentor at the track in order to give them access to certain parts of the track or the paddock that they would never have access to as a regular fan, in order to learn how to better shoot cars in motion and kind of capture the sights and the sounds of an event. We've had people that have come on board in hospitality. We are working with OEMs inside some of their VIP tents in order to help provide that customer service and that VIP experience that we are able to do, at least post or pre-COVID. We're hoping to do it again here post-COVID. But the other thing is the beneficiaries that come on board, they could have zero experience in this world. All they need is to have that willingness to come on board with an open mind, to find that mentor, that team, in order to where they can learn some new skills and give back and realize that they still have skills and value to give back to this world.
I guess I'd like to ask Lynn as well. Where else has that sort of that situation happened, where, of course, that you mentioned the photographer, where their interests lie outside? Is that something that happens a lot, or does it seem like most of the beneficiaries prefer the hands-on working experience versus photographing something or working behind the scenes in the garage area? Tell me a little bit more about that, and if that happens a lot. I'm kind of curious to see what people generally seem to go for.
Well, I'm going to jump in for Lynn, because unfortunately she had to step away as the event coordinator and go check on Will, down there with the DXTT race team and make sure everything's going well. And plus, we still have Cody and Craig on site to help them break stuff down. But anyways, no, it's the majority of people that do come in, they're definitely interested in the race car. We've had some people come right off the bat, go, I want to be a race car driver, not completely understanding the process to compete at this level. But definitely applaud their enthusiasm. But it's the majority of people want to touch and be a part of the race cars, but there's a good handful of those that are interested in other aspects of this. Things we're looking forward into 2021 as well. Potentially is introducing people to the marketing side. That might be through CrowdStrike Racing. That might be through more with the SRO series writ large, and exposing them to the business side of this world. Because again, that's kind of one of those things that, unless you're a part of it, you wouldn't even know how to go about getting involved in it. And those are some things we're looking forward to.
There's so much more to racing than just getting out on the racetrack and going around the racetrack. And going back to Julian, we're talking about the strengths and weaknesses of team performances and cars. I mentioned earlier that each of these cars, with the way that they're set up and homologated for this series, have their strengths and weaknesses. Where is this Mercedes really at home? Is it tighter and twistier racetracks? Is it the bigger, faster tracks, or is it somewhere in the middle?
I would say it's somewhere in the middle. So when you look at the car concept, so we're definitely not the heaviest car. That means we're definitely not the quickest on the straight lines, but when it comes to corners and performance-wise, the car is really good. And it's drivable on any track. Doesn't matter if it's a high-speed track or a low-speed track. So the car is just set up for all race series, and the main purpose of the car is to be drivable and safe. So that is the main purpose of the Mercedes-AMG GT3.
And obviously, when teams sign up to run in SRO or other series abroad, actually, let's hang tight here. Here's George Kurtz.
But George, as you know, these driver changes are so important. What's going to be crucial on this pit stop?
Well, as you said, it's going to be all about a good driver change, and we've done some practice. Obviously, we worked together for many years, and hopefully we get out in first place, and just keep the momentum going.
So Colin Brown continues to lead in this Mercedes, and Julian, I meant to go back to you and talk a little bit more about this Mercedes, but it's the strengths and weaknesses, obviously, for each manufacturer don't just come in the form of on the racetrack. I'm sure there's more reasons why someone would go with a Mercedes over Lamborghini or Bentley or Ferrari, and so you mentioned the support that these teams get from Mercedes in the paddock area. How far does that extend in the race weekends, and how else can the manufacturer be supportive of the race team throughout the season?
Well, so that actually starts whenever the team approaches the manufacturer first off. So I think it's everything. So it's the process of how to get the car as quickly as possible, how well prepared the car is when the first gets it, how easy the process is of getting spare parts, how easy it is to get technical support if you need any, and then just how to facilitate getting quickly with the car as quick as possible. And another big aspect of the cars is the running cost. So that is simply a cost per kilometer of these cars, to just make it also economically efficient for a team to run one of these machines.
And of course, there's a handful of cars from CrowdStrike Racing here this weekend. And I was mistaken earlier in the weekend. Again, GT America, a relatively new concept, a new series for 2021. I had thought that the 04 that George Kurtz was competing with in GT America was the same as the car that is running here and leading this race. But it turns out they're running two separate cars. And Julian, that's got to be an advantage to be able to have a secondary car where you're not wearing out that car a bit more throughout the weekend. I'm sure that's a luxury not all the teams have, but it really goes to show that the car can be really, really strong in not only one format, in a single class format, but also in the multi-class arena as well.
Right, absolutely. And I mean, the reason behind that is simply you don't want to endanger your race program, for example, in the GT World Challenge America, by racing in GT America as well. I mean, you cannot predict how the race would be, and if there was any contact, for example, in the GT America race that could endanger competing in the GT World Challenge as well, that was simply why George opted to have the second car, so each car for each series.
Really, really interesting. Also, what about the setups of these race cars? And you mentioned how once the teams get the cars sort of in their hands, but you've built in some adjustability into these cars where you can tweak aerodynamic settings and suspension settings to get these cars to handle well. what are some of those things that these drivers can adjust, and how does it help them be the best that their team can be on the racetrack?
Right. So the biggest thing actually that the driver can adjust while being in the car is he has a fully adjustable ABS system and also fully adjustable traction control. So that means however the track might change throughout the race, also if there might be changing weather conditions, for example, he can adjust the car to feel safe and to be quick in it. I think that's one of the major advantages of these cars, because obviously the team set up the car for the race weekend, but if there would be any change throughout the race coming up, then the driver can directly react to it from the car.
Well, you mentioned weather changes. Kevin, I'm really curious about your experience driving in inclement weather. Of course, you've been running touring cars that are generally front-wheel drive and have a little bit of an advantage in that regard with the way that they're set up. But have you had a lot of experience driving in inclement weather on a racetrack? And what's that experience like? And would it be nice to have that fully adjustable traction control system available in that car?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, we spend a lot more time racing in dry weather like today than we do in the rain. But that's really what throws the biggest wrench into a inclement weather race is you really don't know what the track is, because in the dry generally you can gain a little bit of grip depending on the temperature or how much rubber's on the track, but the change isn't very massive. But in a rain race, depending on how much water's on the road and how much kind of rainfall is happening at that moment, the track could vary up to 10 or 15 seconds a lap. And then that's not even accounting for the fact that you kind of lose a lot of visibility when it's raining from some of the water getting thrown up from the cars ahead of you and the water kind of hitting the windshield, and all of those things combined to make a kind of wet race a lot more kind of risky. So a lot of drivers kind of don't necessarily push as hard in the rain, and that gives an opportunity if you're comfortable and if your car is safe enough to really push and gain a lot of advantage.
And for the Operation Motorsport folks, we're talking about weather and challenging conditions in which to perform, not only for the driver but also for the teams. What's that like, just from a morale perspective, to have those cold, dreary days, but then also the days like we had today, where Kevin Boehm is victorious in TC America? The ups and downs of any team are extremes in motorsport. But take us through some of the tougher days and some of the better days, and how you keep team morale up throughout the year.
Well, I'd say a lot of that just, again, goes back to your own personal military experience. And, myself, after 28 years, I can tell you there were plenty of days where we were cold and wet in the mud, but it's looking at that person to your left and your right that's sitting there suffering with you that still makes it all worth it at the end, because that's who you're working with, and that's what's part of your mission. Whether it's here in here in California, with great weather today, or my own personal experience was in Anglesey race circuit in November off the Irish coast, where we're doing a 12-hour endurance race with a Mazda Miata MX-5 Global Cup car with open cockpit, and you've got the weather beating in that time of year. Definitely makes things challenges, but again, we are all in there suffering together, and you win as one, or sometimes your challenge is one. But at the end of the day, it's all about working together as a team.
Absolutely, and we're closing in on our pit stop window here for the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. Round 1, race 2 here at Sonoma, and Julian, the differences in the cars, of course, go beyond just how they look and how they're built, but also in terms of the strategies that are available to teams. Efficiencies, especially with a motor as big and loud as that Mercedes, it makes a whole bunch of torque and a whole bunch of awesome noise. But how, in terms of endurance racing, it's a very successful platform there as well. So it's got to be good not only over short sprint races like this, but also in 24-hour enduros all over the world.
Oh, absolutely. So that's the pinnacle, actually. So these cars especially are dedicated for long distance races. So of course the car has to be durable enough, not only for a 1 hour or like here 90-minute sprint race, but rather for a 24-hour race. So regardless of the conditions, so whether it might be at the Daytona, so the Rolex 24, or if it is at Nürburgring 24 hours or Spa 24 hours. So that is definitely one of our key elements when developing such a race car, that it is durable for at least the 24 hours to be successful with the car. So yeah, of course.
And for Kevin, you sort of become one with your racing machine. You begin to trust it, and it becomes sort of an extension of your body, in especially those longer races where you start to kind of get into the zone. But also the strategy aspect behind the scenes. There's a lot of people crunching numbers on how best to attack a pit stop sequence. We got P1TS running in the background for me, so I'm kind of analyzing when we'd see the drivers hit pit lane. But Kevin, with a Pro-Am lineup like we have for the 04 car, Colin Brown is leading this race and making pretty decent time. To me, it seems like Colin should stay out as long as he can, and then pit and turn over to George Kurtz. But George has also been mighty successful this weekend. So I wouldn't want to be the one up there on the pit box making those decisions, but somebody has to.
Right, and what they're really going to be looking at is kind of the expected lap time from the George and all the other drivers that he's going to be on track with at the same time. And they're sort of already going to have an idea of where he stands pace-wise. And, of course, if there's someone that's maybe got a little bit more pace than him, then they'll want to keep Colin in the car as long as they can to try to minimize the amount of time the other car has to gain an advantage. So it really comes down to the team. They're going to be looking at data, not just now during the race, but through this whole weekend and trying to analyze where each driver or where each team has an advantage. And that's really what goes into making the decision.
And for Jason, not only does Operation Motorsport help the garage and in other areas, but has there been interest in strategy perspective, that side of things, and looking at the race from a top down? Is that something that you've seen beneficiaries interested in the past?
We have, and up on our Canadian side with Tooth Autosport, we have a gentleman who came on board as a beneficiary, and after his Canadian service, was going to college for engineering, very interested in motorsports, and now we find him as still working his way up within the Tooth Autosport organization, but he's a race engineer. He's learning how to become that race engineer and apply that skill set, the math and the science and the educated guess and the analytics behind in order to make those determinations on how to properly set up the race car and help that driver give them what they need to be successful on track.
So one of our first pit stops from our front runners, that is one of the Lamborghini Huracans entering pit lane. Jordan Pepper will come on down. Was the pole sitter, had a big bobble at the opening lap. Moving back to Julian, at the front right now, it's Colin Brown in that Mercedes-AMG GT3. Behind him is a Porsche 911 GT3R. Now these two cars, other than one of them not being something like an SUV or a truck, could not really be more different. The Porsche, a rear-engined platform, with the Mercedes being the front-engine platform. They make power in very different ways, have a different number of cylinders. And isn't that sort of the beauty of GT3 racing, is that those two up front can compete with two totally different ideas on how to go fast?
It is. That is the beauty of the balance of performance. So if you really nail that down, you just have the perfect competition between completely different concepts. So the 6-cylinder boxer engine in the Porsche and our naturally aspirated V8 engine, 6.3 liters. So yeah, but in the end, it's just the difference of concepts that also makes up for how good the racing is in here. So the BOP is really looking good here. So we have a great competition going on between different manufacturers. So just if you look at the top 4 cars, so you have 4 different manufacturers fighting for the top position. So that is really a great thing about GT racing.
And one of those top 4 is going to hit pit lane, Venturini in the Lamborghini. But as you had mentioned, 4 different cars. The Mercedes-AMG GT3 kind of a front mid-engine layout, actually, Julian. That engine is actually pushed quite far backwards, and that's sort of to gain a more neutral balance in the faster corners. And it seems like from a design perspective, that's worked out pretty well. But some pressure coming from the Porsche. So it's not real. I mean, it is front engine, Julian, but it's not quite as front engined as it could be.
Exactly. So the engine is just placed behind the front axle. So that is exactly what you just mentioned with the front mid-engine. So by just bringing back the engine to the center of the car, you just balance out the weight more equally between the 2 different axles. And that just makes up for, a better handling of the car.
And as we had mentioned, the top 4 drivers, so the front mid-engine layout in the Mercedes, and then it was the rear-engine layout of the Porsche 911 GT3R, and then a mid-engined Acura NSX GT3 with a turbocharged V6. and then, of course, the Lamborghini Huracan V10, which makes a whole bunch of noise. A very different note of that from the Mercedes AMG and Honda, and Kevin, your Honda, it doesn't make noises quite as loud or thundery, but it still does have a pretty good little power plant behind it. And what's your experience like, Ben, with the power level change from the TCA car to the TC car, and what's the numbers look like? I know that the TCA was not a rocket ship necessarily in a straight line, but what's the adjustment been like?
Well, I mean, last year's Civic Si, especially once you consider the BOP and the power level that we were racing in SRO, you really drove it like a momentum car. And in a lot of ways, it didn't feel very powerful because it wasn't. And that was just to make it equal with all the other cars. And it's definitely a big change going to the TC car this year because I went from a 1.5-liter turbo engine to a 2-liter turbo engine. And this year's car is making just that over 100 horsepower more than last year's car, which let me tell you is quite noticeable on track. So definitely having to pay a lot more attention to tire management and really it makes it even more premium on getting the car set up correct so that you can not only be fast in the first half of the race, but also maintain that speed close to the end so that you can have some tire and some car left to battle for a win.
And Jason, for your team, if there were engine issues or issues that are sort of motor related in that Honda, is that something that teams are allowed to work on, and is that something your guys would be able to do, is go in there and work on those engines, or is it a situation where you just get a new one like you would for your road car if you had a significant issue?
Well, I'll jump in on that one, Kyle, and
sure.
It really comes down to what the issue is, because sometimes we actually had some issues this weekend where we noticed some water kind of on the bottom of the belly pan of the engine, and we were able to work with both of our Operation Motorsport beneficiaries honestly within an hour before yesterday's race to kind of take apart the front of the car and analyze what the problem was, so we knew what kind of course of action we needed. And it really isn't something that I would rely on them to do kind of on their own, but together we can get the job done even in a high stress environment where we have a race that's literally an hour away.
Yeah, and our beneficiaries have done similar things in the past. Again, it's with the oversight and with that team engagement to make sure that things are being done to the right standard and what's expected. But we've had people that have rebuilt transmissions with race teams in the past, and that's also part of our education process. We look at growing into 2021 with our academy program, where we're taking beneficiaries that are new to our programs, introducing them more to like a motorsports writ large, and start to assess their skills a bit more. So when we come to a team such as Kevin's or DXTT or CrowdStrike Racing, we have a bit more of a resume in order to present to those team principals to go, here's the skill set that these people are coming on board with. Here's the skill sets that we've kind of helped develop over through our own internal training process. Now it's up to the team to kind of show them the nuanced details of what's expected within that team environment.
And going back to Julian, it seems like I'm noticing an interesting difference between the Operation Motorsport crew and what goes on behind the scenes at Mercedes AMG, where it seems like the guys at Operation Motorsport are all working together very closely and kind of working together to tackle a problem and have their, everyone's working together to solve an issue, whereas at Mercedes, Julian, correct me if I'm off base here, but it seems like there's very specialized individuals that are very, very talented at their jobs that can really feel confident in attacking individual problems on their own versus in a team environment like Operation Motorsport is doing. Two different ways to sort of approach solving issues and making a really great end product.
Right, absolutely. I think that also comes from when you're developing a product, of course, you have a more in-depth knowledge about the product, so rather than if you're just handling the product or using the product while racing that. And this is exactly then when the experts come into play.
Cars on pit lane, the experts in pit road are going to go to work as we make our driver swap. So looks like Colin Brown will jump out of the seat of the race-leading Mercedes AMG GT3 and pass it on over. Here's pit lane.
We talked to George Kurtz ahead of this driver change, and he saw how crucial this would be. But three major things are going to happen during this pit stop, guys. The driver change, of course. 4 new Pirelli Swicks are going to go on that Mercedes AMG, and the refuel. The minimum 87 seconds happens on this pit stop. Teams like to hit that mark as close as possible.
Kevin, they were just mentioning an 87-second minimum pit stop time. That's a long time to be sitting on pit lane, but what it does do is mean that you got a little bit of time to play with on pit road to make sure that you get your job done right. They're going to put George Kurtz behind the wheel of that car. They should go back out, and now they've got 40 minutes to try to retain the lead that they had built.
Right. There's a minimum pit stop time that you have to run, and that includes the drive time from the entrance to pit lane all the way to the exit. So ideally, when you're doing these pit stops, you want the physical work on the car to be done just a little bit early so that you can kind of time your pit exit perfectly so that you're just within a couple of seconds of that minimum time.
Jason, do we see the Operation Motorsports crew sort of wear a bunch of hats? Do we see them over the pit wall as well, and doing both, or is it more that you've got one set of guys doing pit wall stuff and the other set of guys doing garage stuff, or a little bit of the other way?
No, they tend to kind of go wherever the team needs them. So generally they'll start off kind of helping with tire prep and kind of some of the stuff that a novice might be a bit more exposed to when they're first coming onto a race team. And that's really, again, just to help build that trust with the team, and they kind of get to know each other. Then you see things kind of evolve into, like, again, Will Babineau just completed, going over the wall here for the number 19 car to fuel that thing up and get it back out there as quickly as it could and continue competing today. So it just depends on the beneficiary. It depends on where their interests lie, and it depends a lot on that team and the trust that we've built over time with them.
Oh, big jump over the curbs in turn number 9 for George Kurtz on a flying lap here, trying to get back up to speed. Kevin, those curbs in turn number 9 and around Sonoma in general are pretty sizable. As we see some time information on pit lane, it looks like a minute 34 on pit lane for the DXCT Racing number 63, minute 33 for the 19 car, but the 04 quicker than the other two team cars. So their job has been done. But going back to the curbing around this racetrack, you can really get aggressive and attack around here, but also sometimes you can tack a bit too much and get the car airborne, and then it doesn't want to turn.
Right, and really, it depends. Every turn here at Sonoma has different
Today's
types of
coverage is
curbing,
brought
and
to you in
definitely
partnership-
the first kind of half of the lap, the curbs are really steep and they're really kind of jagged. So if you kind of touch those, they normally kind of throw the car off and bounce, and especially these GT3 cars that are kind of depending on the aero kind of platform of the car to be somewhat stable. You don't want to kind of be changing your ride height as you bounce across the track, because then your grip level is going to be really inconsistent. So especially the first half of the track, you try to sort of be really close to the curbs, but you don't use them. And especially in the turn 9 area, because the speed's so low, some of that aero isn't so important anymore. So you're jumping over those curbs really to kind of shorten the track and straighten out some of the turns.
And for Julian, these cars are built for so many different types of circuits around the world. You mentioned that they're really at home in those endurance races, but as you mentioned earlier, there's, of course, Daytona, which is relatively flat and smooth. You've got tracks like Bathurst in Australia that are super mountainous and have a lot of elevation change, like here at Sonoma. You've also got very, very high speed tracks like Watkins Glen and Circuit of the Americas, which I'm actually at right now. So many different kinds of circuits. And how is that done to decide to build a car for a specific type of circuit, or do you just try to make it the best all-arounder it can be?
Well, during development, I would say as a manufacturer, you just try to find some worst case tracks. So the tracks that would really nurture the car, that would be the toughest for the car to compete on. And if the car is durable on these type of tracks, you just know that it will work on all other tracks as well.
It's a really interesting point. So sort of build to the roughest as we see the Ryan DL machine have a bit of a loop here. And we're going to catch up for the... Oh, you see him in the background already looped around. And looking at where he is on track, Kevin, that's at the exit at turn 7, getting into the S's area. We see a little bit of damage on the left side of that car. Is that just potentially an oversteer issue? Do you think he might have gotten some help getting around? What could have caused that problem in that spot?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, but it definitely looks like there's a fender liner or something kind of hanging off the car. So I think they're going to try to come in and get that removed so they don't have any worries about cutting down a tire. But since they kind of just came out of the pits. It's possible the tire temperature wasn't kind of all the way up, and maybe the grip level wasn't really there yet for the to really push.
Looking at the timing and scoring, you'll have noticed that George Kurtz, who's in that 04 Mercedes-AMG GT3, has dropped down a couple spots. However, he continues to lead the Pro-Am category. So Kevin, again, we are sort of in a multi-class race, even though they're all in similar machinery. The different categories of driver lineups, Caldarelli and Lewis, all pro lineups on their teams. George Kurtz and Colin Brown, again, a Pro-Am team, still leading in their category.
Yeah, that's right, and really, you don't want to kind of spend too much time trying to race the different cars that you're not necessarily competing with. I think it's always good to kind of have that overall position as something that you can strive for, but in the end, the class win is the priority.
Julian, we touched on single class versus multi-class racing a little bit earlier in the go. We mentioned Daytona, which is where these cars are classified as GT Daytona cars, even though they're essentially the same. And they sort of play an interesting role over on that side because in terms of the class structure, they are the least powerful cars in their class structure, but here in GT America, which ran earlier today, they are the fastest in the class structure. So how does the multi-class racing sort of affect the way that these cars are driven and raced, and the teams kind of set them up any differently for one class versus the other?
Not necessarily, but I would say it's for the driver, it's just a huge challenge, and maybe Kevin can catch up on that as well, because those type of drivers racing a GT3, they're used to be the quickest class normally, but at Daytona they are the slowest class actually. So it's a lot about traffic management and just make sure that the quicker cars can pass without you losing time racing your own race against your competitors. So that is really a big challenge also for the GT3 drivers, not only for bronze rated drivers, but also for the professionals.
Also for GT4 as well. We're talking about the Mercedes-AMG GT4 platform. The same thing is true there, where we've got, of course, our GT4 America, where those cars run in a single category, and then in GT America, they're again the slower of the three that are available between GT3, GT2, and GT4. So it kind of goes on both of those platforms. And we talked a little earlier about the GT4 versus GT3. You mentioned that the GT4 is a little bit more like the road car. From my understanding, the GT3 car actually has a different motor than the road car because the road car motor is actually too powerful for the spec. Can you take me through that situation?
That's very true. So for the GT3, like mentioned before, we have the naturally aspirated 6.3 liter, which actually came from the SLS AMG GT3. So the previous model that we had homologated as a GT3 race car. Whereas for the GT4, as it is closer to the street car, we have the 4-liter V8 bi-turbo engine installed.
Well, Colin, throughout
so
the
that is
broadcast,
a complete
we've talked
different
about the
engine
wacky
layout.
start at the beginning of the race. From
Here's
your
Colin Brown.
perspective, what did you experience?
Yeah, I really wasn't sure what was going on because he was slowing down all the way to sort of that restart zone where we're supposed to go. And then when the green flag came out, he like put the brakes on. So I wasn't really sure what happened, but just tried to follow the rules from my standpoint. And obviously proud of these guys at CrowdStrike, DXDT. It's been a tough weekend for us, sort of ups and downs. George has been, doing a great job in the GT America class, winning both of those races. And we've had speed in this car, obviously had an incident at the start yesterday, but, today was great. Really just proud of these guys. Cool to have some folks from CrowdStrike out, and hopefully we can keep this going and get the deal done at the end of the race here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Colin, very excited about how the day has gone so far here, and Kevin, again, pretty happy with the way the day has gone. The weekend has not been super silky smooth for this team, but they finally got it rolling here in the last 30 minutes of this race, and they've actually gapped that Porsche that was following them by a little bit. So they've got a little bit of breathing room here, though. The push is relentless, and Kurtz is gonna push his car all the way to the end.
Yeah, that's right, and it really goes from the very beginning of the weekend. Even when things aren't going right, you never give up, and you keep looking for ways to improve and fix any obvious issues. And this is a perfect example of all that hard work kind of coming together. And definitely George is kind of gonna be they're gonna be telling him that gap over the radio, and he's gonna be kind of feeling the car and really trying to manage that lead so that he can guarantee and bring it home.
Of course, the other car right now, driver swap from or to David Askew, I should say, as we work towards the last 30 minutes of this race. Top speeds by Race Vision, powered by AWS. The BMW of Dynan, the quickest in the speed trap here. Caldarelli and Lewis in the Lamborghinis. Taylor Hagler and Salas in the Acura machines. I just wanted to touch a little bit more with the Operation Motorsport guys. Jason, at the end of the weekend, we've got the last 30 minutes of GT3 racing up here in just a moment. At the end of the weekend, what's the plan for the team? How do you guys celebrate a successful weekend with Kevin after a race win?
So we just sit back and focus on those things and learn, what went well and identify that. But, truth be told, we also kind of look at maybe what didn't go as well and what we could take away, upcoming Coda here next to improve upon for the next event. The guys will go back and, tell their family and their friends about it. We see a lot of increased social media posts and presence, and it's just, they're just gonna kind of bask in the glory, if you will, of just knowing that they came on board here in Sonoma, were value added to the team and helped Kevin get to the podium.
It's really cool. It's got to be super satisfying to help a team get to victory lane and to have a driver like Kevin help facilitate that always helps too. Here's a pass for position. That is the machine currently being driven by Michael Dynan in the M6 on, I think that's Ziad Gondor in the number 9 Pro-Am Lamborghini. Actually, must have already swapped positions. They're going to re-swap again. Checking back in, it's Askew in the 63 car down in 11th for DXDT Racing. The 19 car, another DXDT car, is running in 6th overall right now, P4 in Pro-Am. But a drive-through penalty for that number 9 of Ziad Gondor. And I didn't catch what that violation was for, but I might guess, Kevin, that it could have been for some of the start issues potentially, but I don't think that car started up front. Was it a pit lane violation potentially?
Yeah, I think the odds are it's something to do with pit lane. It's definitely it seems like it would be easy to always follow the rules in pit lane, but there's quite a few you have to pay attention to, including speed and number of people over the pit wall and a lot of little nuanced things. So there's any number of reasons why it could have happened, but most likely it came from something to do with the pit stop.
Always looking on ways to improve. Going back to that from what you were mentioning before, for Jason after you guys had talked, but I'm also would like to bring this back over to Julian about improving race cars, and not only from the team level, but from the mechanical and manufacturing and engineering level. We haven't really touched on the Evolution variant of the Mercedes-AMG GT3. Of course, we're running the kind of the wider nose, so some different bodywork. What changes in these Evo kits, and what does that mean, and how does it affect the driving and the racing on track?
Right. So the car, the Mercedes-AMG GT3, was first introduced in the end of 2015. So the car was running now for almost 6 seasons. And then for 2020, we just brought that Evo kit. So the new Mercedes-AMG GT3. Like you've said before, so we changed some bodywork panels, which of course affect the aerodynamics of the car. And we also introduced a new ABS, which should be a further improvement of the yet good ABS, but that should further increase the drivability of the car, and especially for the non-professional drivers, so the amateur drivers, that is really something helpful, and that was actually the biggest part of that.
There's incremental improvements as the body style goes on. There's also some regulation changes coming to the GT3 category in I believe in 2022. So I know I'm sure you can't say a lot, but I'm sure that in the background there's already work on the next variant of this Mercedes-AMG. Can you tell me anything about that beyond there might be or may not be a car coming for that category?
The 2022 change in homologation, that actually does not affect the car in its current specs. So as we had the car homologated for the 2020 season already, we're not forced to have a new car introduced by 2022, and that is definitely not the plan. So the car will run in the current spec until at least the end of the 2023 season.
Well, that's really great to hear. And Will Babineau, we were talking about him earlier, Jason, just got to do a pit stop, and it was a fairly successful one. The 04 retains the lead in Pro-Am. That's got to be so much fun to jump over the wall and perform a pit stop. And for Will, that's got to be a pretty thrilling experience.
No, it absolutely was. We talked to Will, a little bit earlier today before this race, and he was just ecstatic for the opportunity to take on that level of responsibility, knowing that, if he doesn't do his job and get that car fueled to whatever the team engineer is calling for, that has a huge potential impact on where that car finishes in the race. So, we're thankful, to DXCT for having the trust and confidence of Will, and CrowdStrike Racer to have that trust and confidence of Will to take on that level of responsibility. Lynn just came back in from visiting with them, and she can speak directly to just how ecstatic he is to be a part of that.
Yeah, I just was called down to the hot pits because Will is excited that there was going to be the car coming in. And what was really great about it was that Cody and Craig, our other two beneficiaries here on site this weekend, are finished up with their duties, and they were down there to watch Will, and there were a lot of attaboys and way to go. So they kind of united the three together as their own team this weekend. It was a great opportunity. I was really excited to see them.
And we've talked at length about the team aspect of racing, how it goes beyond just the action on the racetrack and behind the pit wall. But that's got to be so gratifying to have team members and beneficiaries that are sort of supporting each other through the challenges of a race weekend, including like the one we saw here at the start, where thankfully none of the DXCT racing cars picked up damage. But Lynn, the camaraderie, I'm sure, behind the pit wall as well has got to be hugely beneficial to those beneficiaries.
It really is, and you can see by the smile on their faces, and it's really as just a volunteer and a civilian, it's just so exciting to see this happen here.
Really neat. The last 23 minutes of racing coming up here from Sonoma for the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. And out front in Pro-Am, it's still George Kurtz for the 04 car after he took the seat over from, of course, Colin Brown, who started the race a little earlier today. Going back to CrowdStrike and their involvement here with the series. Of course, CrowdStrike's adversaries are not necessarily anything other than friendly competition at the racetrack, but in the world of cybersecurity, it is very, very important to neutralize those threats on a daily basis. CrowdStrike and AWS host CXO summits at race weekends, and where thought leaders in cybersecurity, are invited to meet, share ideas, and solve the biggest problems in cybersecurity. And Lynn, I would like to ask you, since you stepped out for a little bit, what the debrief process is like. We talked to Jason about that a little bit. What do you guys learn from each weekend, and how is that applied to the next event as you guys go throughout a season?
Well, here we are at the start of the season, so we had a lot of activation, but it's also kind of a shakedown of what we need to plan for our next event. We will do a postmortem at the end of tonight, actually, after the race, and of course it starts when we're on the road going back to the airport, just in the car, just everybody sharing what's been going on. Jason and I follow up with a detailed report, and also with the beneficiaries next week, and then we can better plan for COTA, which will be our next event.
And that's really exciting. That's coming up in a couple months. I'm actually at Circuit of the Americas right now for a different motorsports event, so can't wait. Hopefully be back at the racetrack for the next round of Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. And for you, Julian, speaking of Circuit of the Americas, it's one of those global racetracks that provides a unique challenge for these GT3 cars, because it essentially is two different racetracks, where here at Sonoma, it's relatively consistent in how the corners are laid out, and it feels very cohesive. COTA has one half of the racetrack that's very fast and flowing, and the other half that's very tight and twisty. And tell me about your thoughts on both Sonoma and Circuit of the Americas, and what is your favorite racetrack out there on a global schedule?
So I had a funny conversation with the driver earlier today, and he said Sonoma is kind of like a little Nordschleife. So little runoff areas, you're racing in the green, and it's really a good flow in the track. Great racing here, and the same for COTA. I mean, COTA, as being a Formula One track, this is a great venue also for the drivers to compete there. I also like COTA a lot. I mean, it's a very interesting track. You have the long straight, you have the S's, very technical in the infield, so a very exciting racetrack. Personally, my favorite will always be the Nürburgring, coming from Germany. So this is just the most unique racetrack for me. But I also love Bathurst, so this is also a great track. And Macau as a street circuit, also very, very interesting.
That's an interesting one. Kevin, your favorite racetrack? I don't know what it is. I'd like you to tell me what is your favorite racetrack, not only on the schedule for you this season, but also just around the world. If there's one that's not on the schedule, what's your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I think VIR is probably my favorite track. I grew up not too far from there, and every time I go there, it feels like home. So that track is one of my favorites, and I think it's really unique because of it's really high speed, and there's no gravel traps. There's just lots of grass and open fields, and it's just a really unique track. So that's definitely my favorite one on the schedule, and I think probably the Nürburgring Nordschleife is the pinnacle. I don't think any track gets better than that because of the there's no better track that has so much going on every time you make one round of it. So every time I get to drive there, it's a memorable experience that I never forget.
And for Jason and Lynn, if you've got favorite racetracks on both the SRO schedule and ones that may not be.
So for me, I'm a huge fan of the history of like Watkins Glen and VIR and just what those tracks mean here in the U.S. But I mentioned it earlier. From an Operation Motorsports perspective, Anglesey Circuit, just because of the race of remembrance and what that really means to our veteran community. Not only in the UK but up in Canada and the US. And what's really even more important, what speaks is the bonds that we build, because we're the only North American contingent to enter that event each year. So I'd say it really has to be Anglesey Circuit in Wales.
Yeah, and I think I'd have to agree with Anglesey on that, but then I would be amiss if I didn't say COTA. That's my home track, and I'm very jealous that you're there. I was there last weekend. We were there on track, and it's just exciting to have that sort of a venue back in Texas. So I'd have to say COTA next to that.
Well, that's where we're headed next, and it really is a beautiful facility, and it's one that, as a motorsport fan, I didn't really understand how to appreciate it until I had come here, but it really is absolutely gorgeous, and as for me, I hail from upstate New York, so Watkins Glen holds a special place in my heart, but I'm surprised no one said Road America, the National Park of Speed. That's a popular one that you people usually rattle off as well, but it's really interesting to get everyone's different perspectives. I had never heard of the track that you guys mentioned in Wales. I'll have to give that one a look. That sounds like an interesting one.
It is. Unfortunately, iRacing or ACC have yet to map it in order to bring it into the sim world, but I definitely encourage anybody out there that might be from either one of those two organizations, please check it out.
So 17 minutes to go here for Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. Two pro driver lineup cars leading the race right now. Then it's George Kurtz for CrowdStrike. AWS running in third overall, first in class. Here is a pretty fun battle happening between the 19 car being driven by Aaron Vogel and Taylor Hagler in the Acura NSX GT3. Again, Vogel in the third DXDT racing machine with the purple on the car. And chasing each other down. And Julian, Acura versus Mercedes, a Japanese sports coupe and a German Grand Tourer, two very different cars. As we mentioned, the Porsche was different earlier. The Acura, another very competitive platform. But I just love the diversity of GT3 racing.
Absolutely. I just hope that Aaron will get a chance to make the pass. So that will be the perfect ending for them.
And this car being the naturally aspirated V8, of course, the GT4 car has the bi-turbo engine. Naturally aspirated versus the forced induction. From an engineering standpoint, is there a reason, or is there a preference to having a car be naturally aspirated versus something that's forced induction, and why is that maybe the preferred route?
Not necessarily. So the decision to just stick with the naturally aspirated engine for the Mercedes-AMG GT3 coming from the SLS-AMG GT3 was simply that we had such a ton of experience with that engine. I mean, being split over 100 customer cars racing worldwide, of course, you collect thousands and thousands of kilometers where this engine was just approved to be very durable, to be very cost efficient as well when it comes to revision it. So this was simply why we stick with that.
Don't fix what's not broken, that's for sure. It really is a rock-solid race car across the board. Kevin, your car is pretty solid as well in TC America. And just because the TC category is relatively new, I honestly don't know a lot of the differences between the TCA and TC car. So help me understand, the TCA car was a manual transmission gearbox, and was that also a turbo car? Is the SI turbo as well?
Yeah, that's right. The Civic Si, both the road car version and the racing version that we raced in TCA, both have a 1.5 liter turbo engine, 6-speed manual transmission. The road car has a LSD that comes standard, but we have a little bit different one in the that we race here in TC
Well, as we've been
America.
talking about, it is Taylor
That's a little bit better
Hagler's
equipped to
rookie
hit curbs and be more aggressive. The TC car, instead of a 1.5 liter turbo, the Civic Type R has a 2-liter turbo engine. And in both cases, these engines are exactly the same as what you'll find in the Honda Civics at the dealership. So the engines themselves are already fairly reliable, and they're really the turbos are there to in the road car versions to kind of give you some power, but also maintain some fuel efficiency. So here in racing in TC America, the fuel efficiency isn't such a priority, but it's still a necessary thing that we deal with because we want to run the minimum weight we can on track. So the more fuel efficient the engine is, the less fuel we have to start the race with.
I just have to bring up something I think is really interesting. In TC America, Kevin, the engine that you have in your car is 2 liters. The engine that's in this Mercedes-AMG GT3 is 6.3, more than 3 times the displacement. I love racing. It's so cool. the amount of diversity between the different drivetrains and just the sizes between the different classes, not only in wheelbase and width and aerodynamics, but also under the hoods and under the bonnets. Lots of diversity, not only in just the GT3 category, but across the paddock between GT3, TC, TCA, GT4, and the other classes that are here like GT2. And that's a category, Kevin, that we haven't really touched on, but it does participate in GT America. That GT2 class car is essentially similar in ways to a GT3, but more power and a little bit less downforce. And that's a class that we've seen grow here in SRO America.
Yeah, the new GT2 class that was kind of introduced last year is definitely growing, and those cars are, I think, more focused towards the amateur drivers that are really looking for kind of a pinnacle race car, and they're very, very unique in that they kind of resemble these GT3 cars, but they kind of achieve their lap time in a completely different way with, like you said, more power, and they don't rely on the wings as much, which in some ways makes the car a little bit more forgiving for someone who doesn't know how to kind of utilize the downforce. So it's definitely a unique class that's coming about.
So 12 minutes to go here in this second and final race of the weekend for Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS from Sonoma. Looking ahead, we've got Circuit of the Americas in a couple months, and we're also heading to some other racetracks on the list that we mentioned earlier. Watkins Glen back in September. We've got Indianapolis, the 8-hour event, returning in the fall, and that was a really cool event. Jason, you guys were there for that, and we got to chat with you during that 8-hour race. And Indianapolis is one of those facilities that everybody should go to at some point. Tell me about your experience at the Indy 8-hour and what that looked like from the Operation Motorsport side, doing an endurance race, the one and only for the year.
Oh, it was, absolute. I was blessed to be a part of it. Wasn't quite sure if I was going to be able to make it there. We had the opportunity to come in and just kind of help close out the season the way we started. Strong finish with CrowdStrike and Kevin and DXDT. For me personally, the last time I was at that track was in 1992 as a spectator on the infield for Indy 500. And then come in there last year on the sports car racing side, and even with Indy there as well to watch them that weekend. It was really cool just personally to kind of see it from a different perspective.
I'd like to put in what Jason's not saying is one of the greatest experiences that our whole team has, is that having many of us not been to Indy, we all got to kiss the bricks.
That's such a cool experience. It was my first time to Indianapolis as well, and the presence that place has is almost second to none. A really, really cool venue. And for Julian, we were talking about racetracks, around the world, and the halo racetracks everybody puts on a pedestal. For me, it's Watkins Glen, Road America, and Indy are the three in America that really stand out. But then there's Bathurst, the Nordschleife, all those other racetracks around the world. But at Indianapolis, we saw a lot of success by those Mercedes, and we can only expect more in 2021.
Oh yeah, for sure. So really hope for that, and I also think that the grid will be really, really big for that event. I mean, it's a highlight event, so lots of local teams in America will definitely pick up on that. So exciting racing, and I love being at such historic racetracks like Indianapolis, for example.
For sure. Getting down to the last couple laps of racing here at Sonoma. At the top of the board, it's still the Pro driver lineup cars with Lamborghini Huracan GT3s making laps at a pretty fervent pace right now. Last time by, George Kurtz and the Mercedes-AMG GT3 just ran a 143.255 compared to Fred Pordad's 144.1. And Kurtz still the fastest driver in the GT3 Pro-Am category, all the way back to Russell Ward, who's also in a Mercedes-AMG GT3. So finding a lot of success there. There's Aaron Vogel trying to run down Taylor Hagler. That would be for podium. And it would be a really special thing to get two of those CrowdStrike cars on podium, Kevin, in the second round of the weekend.
Right. As a team, you really want all your cars on the podium, but with such a competitive series, that's such a hard thing to do. So obviously, getting more than one is great, but anytime you have a car on the podium, it's been a successful weekend.
And in the background here, we had Jason send me a wonderful photo that I'm going to now share. And this is, of course, the Operation Motorsports crew here at Sonoma here this weekend. There's a look at them on the paddock area all together. And Jason, this is really cool that everyone's got kind of arm in arm here, all masked up, but enjoying the racetrack in the sunny skies here in Sonoma.
No, absolutely. And who you see there, as I'm looking at it from left to right, is Craig, who's almost a 30-year Air Force veteran. We've got Cody in the center, who is a medically retired U.S. Army sergeant after about 4 years of service. And then there in the fire suit and the helmet, that's Will Babineau, who's also a medically retired U.S. Army staff sergeant, about 6 years in service. And that's just the team together. And again, we'll be adding Katrina Williams, who's getting ready to medically retire from the U.S. Army sometime this year. She'll be joining the rest of the crew at COTA.
That's really, really neat. We're going to head back into the race coverage here. Lynn, what's it been like this weekend? The grass is looking a little greener here this weekend than it was when we were here last August. Take me through what it's been like at Sonoma and opening the round this year.
Well, actually, it's beautiful to be here. We finished up in Indy, and we don't have the beautiful mountains in the background. And I'm looking at some of the agriculture excursions through the beautiful white flowers. It was kind of interesting. You could pick up on.
I think they were just mowing the grass there. The groundspeople hadn't gotten around to it, so they're going to take the splitters and shave a little bit off the top. There's that battle for position we were expecting to see between Vogel and Ward. Again, Vogel in the CrowdStrike Racing sponsored car, and Ward in the black number 33. That is that's an all-pro lineup in behind. And Julian, of course, this is Mercedes on Mercedes here, but this really goes to show the strengths of these cars. Running nose to tail like this. Then it comes down to driver a little bit at this point, too. It kind of getting to scrap with the last 7 or 8 minutes. This is a lot of fun to watch these two cars. Same chassis and engine and everything else, but it's team versus team. And wow, look at Ward going around the outside.
Absolutely. Great to see. This is great professional racing, and Erin's really doing a great job here defending from Russell, who's a Rolex 24 winner, so she's doing a great job here.
We're definitely putting on a show at the very least. 6 minutes to go. There is your overall race leader, Rhea Caldarelli for K-Pax Racing. They made a switch from the Bentley Continental GT3, which is a pretty successful car, although it was very big dimensionally. And Lamborghini's not a small car, but trimmed down at least in the height dimension. Look at Ward tracking out wide. Now a dive up the inside into turn 4. Little opportunistic move. That's not going to work. Kevin, 6 minutes. You're driving through the mist here a little bit, but you don't want to make a mistake and go too deep.
Yeah, I mean, I think you try to keep the mist in the back of your mind, but in the end, the race is coming, so you have to try to take every opportunity you see, and probably by following for several laps, you've kind of sized up and know maybe you're better in one area of the track or the other, and maybe that turn 4 area was one of those places, as we see kind of they close up, and you're going to see this accordion effect as they go around the track, because even though these two cars are both Mercedes and they're both great cars, there's a lot of adjustability in the cars, and each one might be better in one place than the other, just as the drivers.
And Vogel defending down into turn number 9. 5.5 minutes of racing to go here at Sonoma, and the race is on for 6th overall down towards turn number 11. Nose to tail here, Jason. This is some pretty high-intensity stuff.
Well, it absolutely is. It's great to see this battle unfolding here in the last few minutes of this race. It just really shows the competitiveness of all the drivers on track, where they're not going to give up until they cross that checkered flag and get down in their cool down lap. So great battle here on track.
One of my favorite sayings is the race isn't over till it's over, and that means once you've passed under that checkered flag, that's when it's done. You can never count anybody out, and some spectacular battles happening throughout the field here today. Up front, it's been fairly quiet since the pit stops. George Kurtz, though, continues to lead in the CrowdStrike AWS Mercedes-AMG GT3 and Pro-Am, and Aaron Vogel defending hard to maintain 4th spot in the Pro-Am category, and 4th or 6th overall, rather. Right behind again, Russell Ward trying to drive through and pick up 6th position overall here. But 4 minutes to go. It's probably about 3 laps left here, Kevin. So as a driver, you're kind of in the zone now, and you're not going to even notice the race is over until you see that white flag and then the checkers.
Oh, I think whenever you're kind of in a really good position, if you're leading, for example, the race always takes a really long time to kind of come to the end, and if you're the car that's doing the chasing and you're maybe even gaining on the car ahead of you, it seems like the race always ends way too soon. So it's weird how the time can be a little bit variable, but definitely the teams in communication with the drivers, kind of letting them know how much time's left and kind of what they need to do to either maintain their position or try to jump the car ahead of them.
Vogel making this CrowdStrike car very, very wide on the entrance to turn 11. Ward a little bit deeper on the brakes into turn 11. Now is going to try to tuck underneath and cross over at corner exit, getting all of that 6.3 liter power to the ground at corner exit. A little bit of traction control maybe across the line with 3.5 minutes to go. And they'll take this battle up the hills once again here in Sonoma. The Green Hills this time around. All this elevation. Cars dynamically compressed down in those lower areas and then get very light over the rises, and how you manage that is really where you're going to find speed. Vogel again sweeping through turn 3 and 3A up over the crest with pressure from a Daytona 24 winning driver from behind, while the race leader in a Lamborghini is all clear sailing with a little bit of lap traffic to deal with here towards the end, but friendly fire between the two Lamborghinis should be able to make this pass relatively easily, and does, and now has one of the other Porsches out on track up ahead. I do believe that is the number 20 car just up the road. And through the S's, this high-speed section into the braking zone again for the turn 9 area. And Julian, you touched on the ABS and how it's different on this Evo generation car. What is different about it? Is it just a more advanced algorithm or in system, or is it just beefed up hardware to make it more effective? What were those changes, and how has it made this car better?
Right. So what the biggest change in the ABS was that it's now more like a cornering ABS, so that it really supports the driver while going into the corner. Rather, the hardware was not touched, so this is purely being done electronically, so from programming that, which came actually from feedback from drivers, especially amateur drivers who are feeling more comfortable with that system going into races, and that's how we implemented that.
Well, it's working very, very well. George Kurtz leads again in Pro-Am and has had such a successful weekend, again sweeping the first rounds of GT America, first rounds of the year. And
he had a great weekend so far, so absolutely flawless job.
Just absolutely crushing it out there. And that car did have some trouble in the first race yesterday, and they've rebounded nicely, Kevin, and that's always a positive thing to even if you have a rough race, to bring it home in victory lane the next day. It wasn't rough from the perspective of finishing. They ended up finishing okay, but coming home with a trophy in hand for winning Pro-Am has got to feel awesome as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's one of the good things about the format of the World Challenge Series with 2 races a weekend. It gives you an opportunity to kind of make up for anything that didn't go right in the first race and sort of give yourself some feeling of redemption. So I'm glad it went a lot more smooth today.
A little awkward interaction there through turn 9 and into the chicane. Coming back to what should be the white flag this time for the race leader. That is Caldarelli in the number 3. Looking out to driver's right on the 488, Sada, who is paired up in an all-AM driver lineup. They're 2 laps down to the overall race leader, but it's 2 miles remaining here at Sonoma for Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. CrowdStrike racing car of George Kurtz and Colin Brown. They started near the front. They have maintained their position in class, and they also have now just 1 lap to go to pick up a win in their category this weekend. And George Kurtz will add another trophy to the shelf if he can finish this one out here. There is Aaron Vogel in the third CrowdStrike car. The 63 of Avascu has had a little bit of trouble. They are down off the pace just a little bit, down in 11th. But Kevin, again, as a team effort, it can't always be an amazing day for everybody, but they're gonna take what they can get and move on to COTA and hopefully come up and be very, very strong and hopefully get everybody on the podium, as you were mentioning.
That's right, and just like Operation Motorsport was discussing earlier, the team's probably going to go back to their shop and really look at the things that went well and the things that didn't, and it's all about trying to improve for the next event, and that some of that will come in results, some of it will come off the track and doing some of that stuff. So in the end, it's always about trying to just get a better result in the end of the day.
Vogel still on a defensive approach here from Russell Ward in behind. Maybe not a defensive line, but certainly keeping an eye on the mirrors. Now through turn 9, the race leader, Caldarelli, in that leading Lamborghini Huracan GT3, sweeping through turn number 10 now, flat out through this corner. Now into turn 11, the last major hairpin on this racetrack, before heading through turn 12 and to the front straightaway. Caldarelli in that Lamborghini Huracan GT3 will win in the pro category for the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. Corey Lewis will sweep on home in second place. There he is in the green Lamborghini. But all eyes on CrowdStrike Racing and George Kurtz, Colin Brown, that combo that has been so successful. They're going to come through and win in the Pro-Am category for this race here this afternoon. Aaron Vogel and Russell Ward drag race to the line. Vogel in the CrowdStrike racing car will edge out the 33 of Ward by a nose. And there's that 04 car going to bring it back to the checkers, guys. What a spectacular race, Kevin. That was a cool finish there for Vogel to just beat Ward back to the line by only about a tenth of a second.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more close than that. It's awesome that over the course of a 90-minute race that 2 cars can finish with less than the length between the tires.
And here again is George Kurtz. Colin Brown picked this car off earlier today, drove it out to a lead, and they were able to retain it. For George Kurtz, 2 trophies in hand from GT America this weekend. He'll add another from Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. Lights flashing, CrowdStrike Racing victory in Pro-Am. Congratulations to DXTT Racing and CrowdStrike Racing for picking up a victory in Pro-Am. What a race, what a weekend for that car and that driver and that team. That is so exciting. Colin Brown will share in the excitement there, but as we see the field kind of recollecting on the back straightaway, a wild race. I want to wish a huge thank you to those who have joined us today. Lynn and Jason from Operation Motorsport, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kyle. It's great to be here. We look forward to COTA and Jason.
Kyle, as always, it's great to hear you broadcasting. Whether it's here in the real world or the virtual world with CrowdStrike's Racing virtual team. So thanks for having us. Really appreciate it. Thank
you so much, Jason and Lynn. And Julian Shook from Mercedes-AMG Motorsport Customer Racing. Julian, thanks so much for your insight this afternoon on the Mercedes platform here in SRO America and elsewhere in the world. Really appreciate that insight and the technical knowledge and the behind the scenes of how these cars get on racetrack and then how they find their way into victory lane. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me. So it was a pleasure.
And Kevin will wrap things up here in a few moments, but congratulations again. You've also got a trophy in hand and the reigning champion of the TCA category from 2020. Looking ahead to 2021 with Operation Motorsport support, do you think you've got the team and the skills behind you to bring a championship home in TC America this year as well?
Well, I mean, that's going to be the goal. I think we still have a lot to learn about the new car and to find ways to make it completely perfect. But the goal is to try to be on the podium as often as we can. And when we can, we want to obviously be on the top of the step there. So based on this weekend's results, I think it's possible, but there's no guarantee because there's so many competitive teams and competitive drivers. And in the end, we just need to continue kind of working together and maximizing the results when we can.
So drivers back on pit lane here as we finish up the weekend at Sonoma Raceway. Again, the next round will be a Circuit of the Americas in a couple months, and I cannot wait to come back out here to Austin and rip around again with all the cars. And we're going to stick around here for the pit lane interviews. I'll let everyone else get rolling here. But for those who have joined us here today, make sure that you subscribe to the CrowdStrike Racing YouTube channel. This Thursday, the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League heads to their 4th of 5 rounds. We'll be joining you again in the world of Assetto Corsa Competizione on Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific. And make sure you don't miss that event. For us here on CrowdStrike Racing, we're going to sign off. In the meantime, if we see George Kurtz in the interview booth, we will bring up that interview for you here in just a moment. But a huge thank you again to CrowdStrike Racing, AWS, Operation Motorsport, Mercedes-AMG Customer Racing, and everybody that made this possible. Robbie Montanola from SRO. And in a couple months, we'll see you here in Austin for Circuit of the Americas, round number 2 of the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS.
And you talk about dominance here to open up the weekend in the Fanatec GT World Challenge powered by AWS here season. And Jordan, I'm going to start with you. When you look at this dominance, what does that tell your competitors?
Yeah, obviously it just shows that the team's obviously done their homework. You know, it was quite a late deal switching to Lamborghini, but incredible effort by the whole Lamborghini Squadra Corsa to supply the team not only with amazing drivers to drive with, but obviously a brilliant car that was faultless from the get-go. The first time we put it down for testing, it was just going like a bullet, and we shone. So hopefully it gets a bit more challenging. Obviously that race already, it just shows that the competitors are right there, you know, but we just executed strategy, everything, undercut them when we could with the new tires, like I said, and just Andrea brought it home, which is awesome.
And as George just said, Andrea, you brought it home and saw the checkered Friday here in SRO America for the first time. Describe that moment.
Yeah, obviously it's a really nice moment. We just had a chat before the start of the race, and you asked me how was to bring back the car and the checkered flag, and it feels great. I think it's all the team deserved 1-2, and today it's a great day to celebrate as Jordan say, all the team effort. So that was good.
Congratulations.
Thanks, guys.
heard it before. The connected age. Life at the speed of the internet. It's a digital world. What you might not have heard is that we can keep it safe. Because at CrowdStrike, we stop breaches. So wherever you go, go with confidence. Anywhere. Welcome to Anywhere. CrowdStrike. We stop breaches.